do you want to introduce or shall I just crack on?
I can introduce, that makes sense to me.
Okay.
Yeah, so welcome everybody. I'm sorry there's only, well, I was going to say 2 or 3 of you, but I'll say 3 because there's 3 of you. And this, I'd like to introduce Jill and Sandy, both from Leicestershire County Council, who work hand in hand with Rutland and the city regarding the signs of safety approach. So they agreed to come to the festival and do a briefing around the introductions to signs of safety. So I'll hand over to you, Jill.
Okay, thank you, Liz. I'm seeing a longer list saying there's 8 people here. But anyway, we shall see how we go, because I'm not finding 8 on the list of names. But a warm welcome to you guys for coming to a Twilight sort of introduction to the concept of signs of safety. What I wondered was, since there are only sort of 4 in the room, whether or not you might like to be able to introduce yourselves, just say your name and what service area you come from, what you do for a living. Is that okay? And if we can start with Amanda, please. Hi, Amanda.
Hi there. Yeah, I'm Amanda Grant. I'm quite a newbie. I've only been with the service a couple of months, but I'm working for the early years development team. I'm one of the officers there.
Oh, so, right. Welcome, Amanda. And is that city, county or Rutland?
Sorry, that's city.
City.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, so that's lovely. So you're a newbie, so this will be of interest to you. I bet you have plenty of questions for this. Thank you, Amanda. Next person on my list is Anita. Hi, Anita.
Hi, yes, I'm Anita. I am a family support worker for the County Family Service at Living Without Abuse.
Ah, right. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, that will be really interesting to hear a bit from you. Look forward to that. So warm welcome to you, Anita. I've got Sarah. Sarah, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Yeah, so I'm Sarah and I lead a private day nursery alongside the owner.
Okay. And is your nursery in Leicester or Leicestershire?
It's in Leicestershire. Yeah.
It's in Leicestershire. Okay. A warm welcome to you. I've met with many of your colleagues over the last few years. And actually, I think you'll find this afternoon quite interesting. And I think you'll find it to be of value to take back to some of the work that you do. Now, forgive me, because I've got a senior moment, and I can't remember if Liz actually introduced Sandy Desai as well. Sandy, were you introduced?
Yes.
You were. All right. Thank you all, Liz. You are wonderful. Can I just explain that Sandy is a new colleague to the team, and this is one of her first times delivering any training online. So she's going to take a small but significant chunk of it to share with you, so she has a practice. Now, what I need to say straight away is that in the unlikely event of there being any IT issues, I will not be asking Sandy to step in and take over, because she'd leave me then. I can't do that to her, okay? So, but all being well, my internet is safe and stable this afternoon, and we'll be able to proceed. Now, because there are only 3 in the room, unless there's anybody else arrived whilst I've been chatting and I've missed it?
No.
No, okay. So because I've only got 3 in the room, it kind of makes it a bit more intimate. So I'm wondering whether or not we try and reduce. Now, I can give you the full 2 hours, and Liz and Daria, who know me well, know that I'm a happy performer. But if you'd like me to cut it down and for us to have a little bit more conversation, I'm also happy to do that. So could people come forward and say what they think they might like?
I potentially can only stay in for an hour.
Oh, okay. Well, that actually is really helpful to know. So if that's the case, maybe what I do is I tailor it to the hour, Sarah, so that we actually cover that for you. So you need to leave at what, 5 o'clock?
5, yes.
Okay, well, look, rather than waste any time with this, because we've started late, hoping that more people would join, I'm going to crack on and we're going to give it a whiz tour till 5 o'clock. Is that acceptable to everybody? Thumbs up.
That's a great.
I'm taking that as a yes. Okay, so lovely. Our housekeeping is, let me get my little arrow here. Okay, housekeeping is very straightforward. It is, you're living at home. I know you're working from home. It's hard, and there are interferences like animals, like IT, like kids coming in and banging the door. It's okay. Don't worry. So we have to be kind to one another. All I'd say is that if you stay on mute, then I won't hear people offering you a cup of tea. But if you want to speak, remember to unmute so that we can hear you. We'll have conversation, we'll ask questions, and please pile in. Don't worry about speaking over one another. We do it all the time. It's not a problem, and there's only a few of us anyway. Okay, but the most important thing is look after yourselves. Now, I'm hoping that each of you guys will have a pen and a piece of paper to hand. And it needs to be a decent sized piece of paper, like, you know, a big notebook size. And that's because I want to have you experience signs of safety from the inside out. I want to go through the process so you see what it feels like, because signs of safety is a thinking through process. It's an exploratory process that comes to certain conclusions. So I want you over the next few minutes to be dwelling on somebody, preferably a child, not in work if at all possible, but somebody that you might have a wee worry about. Nothing mega, nothing that's going to distress you, I hasten rapidly. But somebody, for instance, when I first did this, one of my kids was in school and he had a very different attitude to study than I did. And that was my worry. So that's an example of the kind of worry you could have. So just have a dwell and we'll come back to that one shortly. Okay. Next slide's taking a moment. I think there's a couple of second delay on it. So anyway, by the end of this next hour, you're going to know the basis of signs of safety. You're going to understand it from the inside out. You're going to hear about certain words and principles. We're going to tell you about it being rolled out and how it affects staff working in Leicester, in Leicestershire and Rutland. We'll introduce you to signs of something, and I'll explore more of that as we go through. And more importantly, I suppose, ideally, I'd love to build in, so what might this mean for you back at the ranch, back where you're working, and seeing what relevance it might have for you. Okay, so signs of safety uses scaling as a technique. Now, anybody who does any solution-focused therapy, any kind of solution-focused work will understand scaling as a technique. And indeed, if you work in health, scaling is often used on a score of 0 to 10 about pain. Now, this scaling is done 0 to 10, but 10 is always the best, rather than 10 is the most severe pain, get me painkiller immediately. So in signs of safety, 10 is always the best it can be, so you're fully informed and aware, and 0 is you haven't a clue, you've not really heard about it, and you've just signed up because you know very little. So of my participants today, could I just ask you to shout out a quick scale of where you think you are, where 10 is you really have a good understanding of signs of safety and its principles and the tools, and you use some of them in practice. And 0 is you've heard about it, but you don't really understand the impact of it, what it's about, and you want to know as much as you can. Where would you guys score yourself today? And you'll have to remember to unmute.
I think I'm a 5.
Okay, lovely, thank you. And somebody's used the instant messenger, it's come up as a 3, thank you. And the third person?
Sorry, I just had to run off to answer the door. Are we asking?
Oh,
are you asking?
Oh, darling, it's that door. It's annoying, isn't it?
Was
Don't
that
worry.
how you're understanding at the moment?
Yeah, how familiar are you with it? How much do you feel you understand?
Not very much, probably about a 3.
Okay, darling, thank you so much. I forgot to mention those darn people knocking the door. Okay. I'm just waiting for the next slide to go over. So what do you need to know about signs of safety and its use? For any of you working alongside the local authority, and so from the 3 of you working in city and county, you will all have connections to the local authority. And what you need to know is that Signs of Safety is an assessment framework, and it's been used now for a number of years across LLR and has more recently been introduced in the health service, so around specialist health visitors, school nurses. All 3 local authorities are at different points of implementation, but all have committed hook, line and sinker to say this is the way we assess, this is the way we work. And when you hear the principles and the ethics behind it, you think, bloomin' heck, are they only saying it now? Because honestly, it is a really sensible way to work. You will also get to explore it, looking at it from a multi-agency point of view, and we'll have a conversation about that. You'll hear about the terminology. Some of you might have already heard about worry statements or danger statements, words and pictures. Some of you might have heard of that. Has anybody heard some of the technology, the terms? Maybe not. What's key here is that you guys are all parts of professional networks around the children you work with and the family. So it's really important that for those families that have a connection with the local authority, that actually you have a working understanding of how social workers, early help staff, specialist health visitors are working with families, so you can play a full and proactive part in that process. When I said signs of something, this is what I actually mean, because signs of safety is fine and relevant in relation to child protection work. Signs of well-being is something that we talk about in early help arenas. Signs of stability we'd be talking about in terms of fostering, foster care, or guardianship orders, or families who take in children from extended carers. We're looking for signs of stability in those placements that children can thrive, because we know that safety, well-being and stability all contribute to a child's ability to thrive. And finally, signs of success, which is like in nursery settings, in school settings, we want children in those settings to be successful. So for instance, if you were looking at a child who was struggling to settle in the nursery, you would use this framework perhaps to work out, so what can we do to help this child settle successfully? What will it look like? What will I see? What are the roots I'm seeing now? And how can I cultivate those roots even more so that I know this child is settling successfully? So, and it is basically as simple as that. So I'm going to hand over to Sandy now, and she's going to give you a little bit of the background history to it. And Sandy, you let me know when you want me to move each page, okay?
I will
Thank
do.
you.
Thanks, Jill. Okay, so I won't dwell too long on this slide. I'm just going to talk to you a little about the history, values and principles of Signs of Safety. So these 2 men pictured here are Andrew Turnell and Steve Edwards. And they are the creators of Signs of Safety. So Edwards was actually a child protection social worker, and he basically wasn't happy with the models and frameworks used within child protection. He felt they weren't really working with the families he was working with. So he came across Turnell, who was doing a lot of work with parents struggling with teenagers and using something called the solution-focused brief therapy. And so they both started collaborating and using this solution-focused brief therapy on child protection work, and Signs of Safety is basically the result of that. And so I guess in a nutshell, Signs of Safety is working collaboratively with families to come up with a solution to keep a child safe when risk is actually present. That's basically what it is. So there's a lot of focus on relationships and putting the child and family at the centre because they are the experts. So here in Leicestershire, we use the Signs of Safety approach from the front door, so first response, where the referrals are received when there's concerns about children or families, and all the way through to child protection, child in need, children in care, and adoption and fostering. So we use the same framework for all of our assessments, all of our documents, all of the work we do with children and families, all the way through their involvement with us. And if you look at the link there on that slide, it actually takes you to the Signs of Safety Knowledge Bank, which has a wealth of resources. I've actually been on there today, and it's got great resources on direct work, practice examples, and things like that. So in your own time, when you get a chance, please do have a look at that. Jill, can I have the next slide, please? My glamorous assistant. Okay, so like I said, one of the main important parts of Signs of Safety is actually building relationships with children, especially with families where there's child abuse and harm is suspected, and that can be really difficult. And so relationship is key and focus. And a part of that, an important part of that, is actually thinking about how we treat families, how we speak to families, and the language we use as well. So when we have conversations with families, sometimes we have to have really, really difficult conversations with families, especially when we are worried about children's safety. And so it's really important to use language that's respectful and also be non-judgmental as well. And if we don't work together with families and we don't build those positive relationships with them, we won't be able to create meaningful safety. And you know how it says on the slide there, child protection, well, this approach turns child protection on its head. That's basically what Signs of Safety does, because you know, previously child protection work involved us making decisions for families, whereas with this approach, we don't do that. We don't do to the family, we actually work with them, because if we don't work with them and we actually make decisions for them and do to them, they're very unlikely to actually buy into the plan to keep the child safe, and they won't engage with that work and the things that we're trying to put in place for them. Thank you, Jill. Oh, I think you've skipped one. Yeah, brilliant, thank you.
Sorry,
so just to kind of, thanks, Jill. So just to kind of brief kind of look at the principles and values, we've talked about some of them already. So we talked about relationships. So the other ones are kind of focusing on the strengths of the family and the family being the experts. And part of that is that this approach is grounded in partnership and collaboration. And it's to work in partnership with everyone involved, and that includes the family and other professionals as well, to explore the worries and how to make sure the child is safe moving forward at those times when the worry is actually present. And that's not about making decisions for families or telling them what to do, but it's about working with them and helping them, asking them questions to come up with solutions themselves. And sometimes when situations where worries don't go away, you know, like I said, it's about creating that safety in moments whilst that worry is still present. So, for example, you might be working with a parent who drinks alcohol heavily. And so that parent might not be able to stop to drink. They might, you know, actually, if they were to stop tomorrow, that actually might have consequences on their health. And so what we need to do is think about how can we all work together to make sure that the child is safe whilst that parent is actually drinking, who's going to look after that child in those kind of situations. And another thing that this approach does is although we do need to explore risk, it goes beyond that. It's exploring the family's strengths and safety. So exploring periods of safety and good care when the risk is actually present. And that's so important as part of the risk assessment. And that's what we use the 3 columns for, which is something that Jill will go in later with you. Asking curious questions on there, so that's incredibly important as well. So it's not about taking information at face value, it's asking what this actually means for that child or the family that we're working with. What's the impact it has on them? So, you know, really digging deep and asking questions like, can you tell me a bit more about this? Tell me about a time you felt like shouting at your partner, but you didn't. What was different in that situation? So really digging deep to see what's happening. And also having high aspirations and looking for better outcome for our families is so important as well. Thank you, Jill. I
totally agree with you, Sandy, there on many of the things you said. In relation to a parent where alcohol is an issue, often that is kind of bread and butter for referrals to us as a local authority, and indeed many others. And whilst we're not advocating that a parent can just carry on the merry way, what we'd be very clearly saying is that the adult caring for the child must be sober. They must be in a fit state to provide childcare, and what we require is that if they are going to drink, they need to sort out suitable childcare whilst they're taking their alcohol away from the child. And indeed, the same would be for the case of taking drugs. And that all hinges on the age and stage and development of the child. So we're not saying, yeah, it's fine. It's not okay for us to see families. It's not okay for kids to see their parents drunk or stoned. It's not okay. It's not good for them to see that. It damages and affects their growth and development. But what we are saying, and what Sandy has said, is we have to be in the real world. And just because a social worker or an early help worker turns around to a dad and says, don't drink, you can't drink, are they really going to listen to you? No. And it's the same about domestic abuse, and we'll come back to domestic abuse shortly and look at what can we do differently that will help us engage with people in a meaningful way that keeps children safe 24/7, because having an allocated worker doesn't do it. I can't make a child safe, not by my existence. When I visit, if I visited, I'd be there an hour a week. In that 1 hour, I see the kid's fine, but what about the other umpteen hours when I'm not present? Who else around loves the child? So I hope you don't mind me diving in there, Sandy. You know what I mean?
No, I don't mind at all. And I completely agree with you. I think, like Jill said, we're not there 24/7, and families are the experts. And so quite often they're not the only ones. You know, it's not just the parents who are around. Quite often there's a network of other family members, relatives, friends who can kind of get involved and support those parents and make sure that that child's being looked after and is safe in those times. So just to kind of, again, you know, on here we've got bit of a typo, but honouring families. So we need to honour the families we are working with and be clear about our expectations of the family, but also ourselves. So if we say we're going to do something, we actually kind of just need to stick to it and do it. And we need to work with them rather than against them. And this is what Signs of Safety encourages, is to work alongside families in a positive way rather than work, you know, doing the work for them, because if we do it for them, it just simply won't work. And again, you know, constantly thinking critically, so honing your questions, being able to kind of think on your feet and ask those questions and do it in a way that's empowering to those families. So I guess in a way coaching people and family members as well around some of those behaviours that might be causing some of those kind of issues around safety, to improve kind of the impact for the child or the young person. And like I mentioned before, it is about asking those curious questions, not just of, you know, the families, but of ourselves as well. So, you know, that might involve us asking those questions of ourselves when we're potentially observing an interaction between a parent and a child and things like that. And quite critically, it's important to have the child at the centre. So if you think about, you know, Jill mentioned domestic abuse. So if you think about domestic abuse, thinking about things like, what did the child hear? Where was the child when these things are happening? What are they seeing? Trying to see things from the child's point of view and putting them at the centre. And really, like I said, digging deep and honing those questions. And then language, which again goes with that collaboration and relationship building. So using simple language that families will be able to understand. And that doesn't include professional jargon. I'm sure kind of in early help and kind of nurseries and things like that, you've all got words or acronyms that you use at times. For me as a social worker, one of the main ones we tend to use is CSE, which stands for Child Criminal Exploitation. And actually, if I said child sexual exploitation, should I say, if I said to a parent, child sexual exploitation or CSE, they probably wouldn't know what I'm talking about. So when we consider language, we need to really explain the detail and go into it and look at how that worries relates to that particular child. So if we're considering child sexual exploitation, what does that look like for the child? So is it the case of an older unknown person is talking to them online? Is it the case of it's a teenager's being taken to a party and being pilled with alcohol and to perform sexual acts against their will? So we need to really explain it in the simplest way that the family is going to be able to understand, and that's so important when we work with people, is to use their language and really use examples to explain it rather than use the language that we're used to as professionals. Brilliant, thank you, Jill. Over to you.
Thank you. Okay. So basically what Sandy's been saying, it's a very much a curiosity question asking. You will know yourselves, we've all had professionals involved in our lives at one point or another, be it at hospital or down the doctor's surgery. You know when you feel patronised and when you feel well treated. So the underpinning girth of Signs of Safety is people who treat you with respect, who honour you. So questions mustn't be laden with attitude or judgment. So that's really an important element of the Signs of Safety attitude. The second important factor is you'll see the triangle. The assessment triangle has not been thrown away. It is still very important. And we need to understand the different aspects of a child's life to understand their growth, their development, and how they are maturing. The third image is about a family. We believe that it takes a village to raise a child. Now, in most families, in many families, we have networks. We have networks of cousins or aunties or uncles or friends. When I moved to England, I knew nobody. I generated a network of friends that I could eventually rely on, and we'd reciprocate support as required. There are times when that network isn't enough, or there are times when some families struggle with that network and it's not working very effectively for them. So part of the Signs of Safety approach is to support those parents cultivate, grow, and develop a network of people who love their children to support them effectively at their times of need. And that might be a little bit regimented to begin with, depending on what the problem is, but it's the people that love the kids that will actually ultimately be able to protect them and nurture them and support them with their development and achieving in family life. This image of system 1 and 2 brains running, I love that one, and it can be a bit ugly, but basically it's system 1 and system 2 are two parts of the way your brain works. System 1 is your automated, you know, you jump in the car, you get to somewhere and you think, oh, I just did that. How did I do that? But you learned how to do it. The system 2 bit is when you had to learn and you were sat there thinking, mirror, signal, maneuver, and you had to really dwell on it and think hard on it. That's system 2. And then you reflect on it and you think, oh my goodness, I nearly pulled out in front of that car. That's a terrible thing to do. What will I do different next time? I must make sure that I watch and pay more attention to my wing mirror or whatever. So those are your two systems of the way your brain thinks. And Signs of Safety requires workers and families to go to that more system 2 thinking, to reflect, to review, to consider, to explore. So it takes a wee bit of time, but it will have a much bigger impact on behaviour, attitude and response. And everything about signs of safety is behavioural. If a child is safe, how do I know a child is safe? What am I seeing people doing that assures the child and me as the professional that that child is safe? So it's very much about the doing. And then the final image, past, present, future, is because we live in a continuum. Our past influences our present and our future. But when we're looking at safeguarding, when we're looking at building on success, when we're looking at maybe a nursery placement isn't feeling very stable for that child, you need to be able to understand what's happened in the past, what's happening in the present, so that you can plan for the future with a clear goal. Because if you don't have a goal of what success looks like, how will you know you've got there? And that's it, pretty simply, to be honest. Any questions at this point? No? Right. What I'm going to do is ask you to get your piece of paper out, and I'm going to walk you through this personal exercise. You will not be sharing the outcome of this. All you'll be talking about is, how did it feel? What did you think about the questioning and the flicking backwards and forwards? Okay? So you keep this private, you fold it up, it's your personal information. So I'm hoping that everybody's been able to think of somebody. And what I'd like you to do now is turn your piece of paper sideways like this. And I want you to draw 2 lines in the middle so you get 3 columns. And this is the young person or the child or an adult that you feel a bit worried about, okay? So you've got them at the forefront of your mind. And I want you to, on these columns, on the middle column, I want you to write what's working well. On the column to the left, I want you to write what are we worried about. And on the column to the right, I want you to write what needs to happen. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to work between the first 2 columns, alternating, asking you questions, and I want you to put the things that come to mind. It doesn't have to be whole sentences, just bullet points, because we're moving quite quickly through this. So in the first question, I want you to draw a wee line at the bottom. You're scaling 0 to 10. And my step 1 is us moving backwards and forwards like I've just said. So my first question to you is, what do you like about this person? So I want you to go in the middle column. What do you like about the person and what are their best attributes? Moving to the left-hand column, about what you're worried about, I want you to write down there what's happened, what have you seen or heard that makes you worry about this young person or adult. Back to the middle column. Who are you worried? Who are the people that worry most about them? What are the best things what are the best things about how they care for them? So who are the people that care most and what is it they do that shows they care the most? Moving to the left column, what words would you use to talk about this problem so that the person you're worried about understands what you're worried about? What words would you use to talk to them about it? Back to the middle column. What would they say are the best things about life at the moment? What are the best things? Moving to the left column. When you think about the worry, what do you think is the worst thing that's happened to them because of the problem? So when you think about the worry, what do you think is the worst thing that could happen to them because of this problem, if nothing changes? Back to the middle column. So thinking about this young person, child or adult, who would they say are the most important people in their lives? How do they help them to live their best life, to live well? Back to the left column. Are there things happening in their life or family that makes this problem even harder to deal with? And back to the middle column. Have there been times when this problem has been dealt with, and to make it even a little bit better? How did that happen? Okay, we're going to move to step 2, which is the judgment, the scaling. So I'm going to ask you about different people now. So on a scale of 0 to 10, where 10 means the problem is sorted out as much as it can be and it feels good enough right now, and 0 means that it's actually worse than you thought, you might need to get some professional or outside help, where would you rate this situation today? Where would you rate it on that scale of 0 to 10? 0 being most worried, 10 being least worried. Okay, where would the young person you were thinking of scale on that same question? 10, it's sorted. 0, it is a problem. Where would they score it? Where would somebody who loves them in the family, where would they score it? And finally, where would their closest friend score it? Okay, so step 3 is you've thought a bit more about this problem. What would you need to see that would make you satisfied the situation is a 10? So assuming you didn't come up with a 10, what would you need to see that would assure you the problem was solved and that it was fine? And then the next question is, what would the person need to see that would make them say this problem is sorted as much as it could be? And finally, what do you think the next step should happen to get this worry sorted out? So what might the next step be to help sort this worry out? Okay, so like I say, what you've written down is private and personal to you. So I don't want you to share any details. And indeed, what I want you to do is make sure you take good care of that paperwork so that you keep it confidential to yourself. But what I'd like you guys to do now is to unmute and tell me, what did you like about that process that I've led you through, that series of very directed questions? What did you like about it?
I like that it takes into account different people's point of view and gets you to think about it from perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's so important because we're all part of it, aren't we? You know, we have people around us that have thoughts and influences. Yes, thank you. Anything else? What else did you like about it?
It enables you to be reflective.
It encouraged you to reflect.
And almost empowered you to be able to come up with a proactive step of what to do next.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? Thank you.
Focusing on some of the positives rather than it all being negative. So really drawing on those positives to
in the round, isn't it?
Yeah.
Complete. How often have you heard people say, do you know what? I don't know what's wrong with this child, but he always does this or he always says that. And it's a huge problem. And actually, people aren't like that. You know, it's we all have elements to us that are annoying or elements of us that are problematic, but we also have elements of us that are really very endearing. And I've been a social worker for 34 years, and of all the children, and I've worked with many kids who have been so badly damaged by poor upbringing and poor life experiences and abuse and neglect. But some of them, they've had so much gorgeous, amazing characteristics about them. They're not their life experience, they're a human being. And actually, if we had a problem, if we had an experience, I want to be seen, don't you? I want to be seen in the round, seen as a whole person and not defined as Jill Graham, disabled, whatever. Do you see what I'm trying to say? Any final comments on things that you particularly liked about that process of exploring through? Sorry, I'm only trying to leave enough silence so if somebody wants to speak that they can, but not leave such a long silence that you think are frozen. But some people say that they like the going backwards and forwards, because sometimes when we have a problem, we're a bit like a washing machine. It goes round and round and round in our heads, but we never seem to reach the end of the cycle and we still feel in a muddle. Whereas what this does is help you go through a process and actually come out with some kind of conclusions towards the end. Does that make sense? So I guess I also, having asked you the question about what you liked about it, what aspects of it might you not have liked, or did you struggle with? And there might be nothing. Usually when I do it with a group, they say, well, actually, there wasn't anything I didn't like. I might have wanted to go faster, or I might have wanted to go slower. So in the main, people say, no, that was actually really helpful. I know it really helped me the first time I did it. And what I noticed on my scaling was the discrepancy between how worried I was versus how not worried my son was. And how I needed to have a different kind of conversation with him about his study. He did fine, he got his A-levels in the end, so it was fine. But it continues, you know, it's just an interesting way to explore. And actually you can use this framework to explore all sorts of things. So I'm conscious of time. Has anybody got any other comments to make before I move to the next slide? And I'm probably only going to do about two more slides actually, because I want to think about where you would use this in your work, in the places you work. So any questions? Okay, put them in the IM if you have, and Liz or Sandy will see them. Okay, so we've done that. This was, oh, come on then, slides. This was, we call it an assessment on one page. Sometimes it has to be a big page, I have to say, because of what, all the questions that you work through. But actually, each question that you'll notice, and sorry, it's buffering at the moment, so we're coming to, has domains within them. And we'll send these, we're happy to share these slides with you. So although we talk about 3 columns, there are subsections within. They're actually very, very important. And they distinguish and separate out different elements of what's going on so that we can actually be a little bit more discerning and a little bit more specific about what the issues are. And for me, that's the thing that I love the most about signs of safety. Normally we'd go into these in detail, but obviously not today. But what I am going to say is that what we've done here, and I don't know if you can see my little hand going round, that whole process of the 3 columns with the 8 domains was looking at mapping. So that's the exploratory work. And it's really important to understand what's going on, the perspectives, because we all have different views on things. And it's that process of engagement and participation, looking at the whole situation in the round, and about seeking out the people who can help bring out the best in us. You'll notice that question about friends, people, how do they help you live well? Because we all need relationships. No matter who we are, where we are, there are people around us that when we're in need, we know we can go to. Now, within signs of safety as a process, what it then, that whole mapping and scaling leads us to a conclusion, because when you assess, you have to come to a conclusion. And the conclusion is the danger statement, safety goal. And the scaling question is a question that's made up that helps people to define and see what behaviours are happening that have the mom, the dad, the family moving away from the danger into the safety. Because we have to be able to measure safety. And that for me is the most overriding bit. I'm not sticking my finger in the wind to say, is this going to happen again? Putting my head in the sand or hoping that based on what a mum or dad has said, I actually want to see demonstrable behaviours that they're doing what they say they're doing, that they are calling in family to help, that they are sober when they're caring for the child, and that they have made solid, reasonable childcare plans if they are going to go and take drugs, because I can't stop them taking drugs. What I'm hoping is that by building in a little bit of muscle and rehearsing, asking for somebody to look after them till they're sober again, can make the difference. Now with domestic abuse, it's a very different approach because domestic abuse is unacceptable behaviour. And what we would explore with them is through the mapping and the safety planning work are the triggers that bring about the violence, because violence is unacceptable. And of a certain level, then it's not okay for that the attacking adult to be in the household. But signs of safety will build them all in order to provide safety, because we cannot put pressure, say, on the mom to be the protector alone of the children. We want to work with the perpetrator of the crimes and say, what are you going to do to make sure that you don't put pressure on this parent, on this mom, because they're their children too. And for some families, they can actually move beyond an abusive, aggressive relationship. And we would work with them rehearsing arguments where they can say an argument, a difference of opinion needs to look like this, and then help them achieve that. The words and pictures that sits beneath here is probably one of the most important aspects of the work. And I'm going to flick through to find you an image of that, because for me it is everything. It's how we work, and I'm going to have to, I don't know if I can get the slides moved on quickly enough, but it's the way we work with parents. So if a parent has a problem, and especially says domestic abuse, how easy is that to talk to your kids about? It isn't, is it? There's my son in from work. Did you hear him? Sorry about that. So when we words and pictures about how we help that parent have the conversation with their child so that they can talk about the tough stuff in a way that's not blaming and not shaming, but that the child understands enough about what goes on, because they hear it all anyway. I'm just scooting through all of this, and I'm sorry, it'll only change one page at a time. So I'm having to flick through here as I go through. But I will find words and pictures for you, because parents have said time and time again, we did work with this one mum who's actually lost 4 or 5 children to the care system. And she spent 6 weeks working with a worker to create an explanation for her son, because he didn't understand why he was there. And at the end of it, she worked through this storybook to explain to him. And it was so powerful. The child took the book from the mum, went home to his foster care and said, look, this is why I'm here. This is why I can't live at home with mummy. And then he went to his dad, who wouldn't participate in the work, and he says, Dad, why were you friends with those people? If you didn't have them in your flat, you might have been able to have me come live with you. And because you keep having all those naughty friends, I can't come and live with you. But what was even more empowering and amazing about that piece of work was the next contact that that lad had with his mum. He ran to her and he gave her a hug. He'd never given her a hug in months. He gave her a hug, and she had brought photographs of him when he was little, and she gave them to the foster carer, and together that foster carer and the little boy at home put those photographs in the foster care family albums, because they knew he was there to stay, and all of a sudden Mum had given permission for him to stay. She no longer felt shame, she no longer felt guilt. And that was such a powerful piece of work. That was a placement that was breaking down. And actually, do you know what? Nearly 4 years on, that placement is still working. That child is seeing his mum. The relationship is a bit better. They're able to give each other a bit of love, but mum has so many needs of her own that she couldn't provide for him all the time, but she still is mum. So a very, very powerful story, and a true story that has the impact. And that's all around words and pictures that's co-constructed with parents to help them have that tough conversation with their children. Now, I'm sorry, it's 1 minute to go, guys, and we've barely scratched the surface. I'm just wondering, I've flicked through all sorts of slides. Tell me, what are the key messages you want to take away from what you've heard today? And I'm happy to come back and do another one, you know, Liz, that people can come to, you know, through the LSCPB. But for those people that are here now that have taken the time out of their busy days, tell me what has landed for you that you think, well, that would be really helpful to think about in my work context. Tell me what your thoughts are. Have we got any thoughts? You can put them in the instant messenger as well. Or if you're talking, you might have put your mute button on. I do that regularly. So you need to unmute.
I think the main thing that I sort of picked up today is the fact that the child's at the centre, and it's about empowering families rather than, you know, doing things to them. It's right. A sort of partnership and working together, and looking at the whole picture and working out a plan in partnership with everybody that's part of that situation.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And for me, there's another element to that. That's believing that somebody can do it. Because when you have somebody's belief in you, you think, yeah, I can. But where you have somebody standing in judgment, you're thinking, oh, sod it, I can't do it. They think I'm crap anyway. Do you know what I mean? So that is very profound. So thank you for saying that. Any final comments? Because I know Sarah's got to go now, but any other final comments about what was most helpful here? I don't think so. Okay, guys, Short and sweet. I hope that I've whetted your appetite enough to see that the framework is fundamental to helping us think through issues, and that our attitude is everything, and that how we treat people and land key messages, that they feel respected, that they feel believed in, and that there's rigor in the testing, because if there's no behaviour to support, then the child's not safe. So it's got to be behavioural. Thank you for taking the time. And Liz, shall I hand back to you?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, no, I just wanted to thank you, Jill and Sandy, for your support and for agreeing to do this. Really, really brilliant. Thank you. I'm always lost in your way of explaining, Jill. Not lost in a bad way. I mean in a good way. In that, you know, every time it. No, yeah, no, I don't mean that. No, every time it brings me back to thinking. Actually, yes, we do need to be putting children at the centre, but working with the people who know best about that child. Yeah, and it always kind of hits it home to me when I hear what you have to say.
Sure, thank you.
So thank you very much on behalf of the Safeguarding Partners and the Festival of Learning.
Well, I hope the rest of the festival goes well.
Thank you very much.